That's Brother Frank Newborn. And Brother Newborn will be discussing with us for the next 45 minutes on how to keep close in mind the fear and inspiring day. So please, friends, let us give our undivided attention to Brother Newborn.
All of us here have the ability to remember things. But sometimes we may say, well, that's true. But my memory ability today is not what it used to be. And that's normal. Some of us feel that we remember things better than others. But while we all have the ability to remember things, we all don't remember the same thing. And there are some things that we all do remember together. For instance, let me ask you this. How many of us here remembers their birthday? Now, we're not going to ask you to tell us who that was. Okay, just about all of us have etched that in our memory. Now, let me ask you this. How many of us here have memorized the actual day of the week we were born? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. How many of us know that? What a difference, huh? What about this? How many of us here remember the date that terrorists brought down the World Trade Centers in New York? Something significant that happened in one state within the United States. How many of us here remember the day that started the war in which practically every nation on the planet was engulfed in war for the first time in history? How many remember this? Significant less number of people remember that grander event. Well, what does that all demonstrate? Well, it simply demonstrates that all of us, while we have the ability to remember things, we have all chosen, or for some reason, managed to remember some of the same things, but then other things that we have chosen not to. Well, that's nothing wrong with that. That's just a fact of life. Now, that being said, we need to do something contrary to that fact of life this morning. All of us here have a vital need to fight the human tendency to forget things. One thing in particular. Because it is absolutely vital that all of us in attendance today leave this meeting this morning all memorizing a particular event. We cannot afford to have one person in our group today leave this meeting this morning and not remember a significant, special day. It's a day that we haven't mentioned yet, and it is one that yet lies ahead in the future. It is a day, an event of divine origin, not human. And it is an event that will forever change the course of human history and will affect every breathing thing. What day is this? Let's let God tell us. The Bible in the book of Joel. Joel chapter 2 is one instance in which Jehovah tells us all about this special, unique day that we should all remember. He describes it in Joel chapter 2. We're going to focus in to what he says in verse 30 and 31. See if you can identify what day this is that we should have in mind. Describing it in verse 30 of Joel chapter 2, Jehovah says, "And I will give portents in the heavens and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun itself will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and fear-inspiring day of Jehovah. That's it. That's the day. That's the event. That's the date that's on the horizon. The coming of the great and fear-inspiring day of Jehovah. Now, what is that? What is the great coming fear-inspiring day of Jehovah? Well, simply put, this day is the time in which Jehovah God, the universal sovereign, will once and for all act against all those who do not choose his rule, and at the very same time act in behalf of all those who love and respect him as the supreme sovereign. And because of that, every human soul is going to be eternally affected on that day. Now, given the significance of that event, the magnitude of the effect it's going to have on the planet, on our history, on every human breathing thing, here's a vital question. How many of us, because of its importance, have memorized the date that day is going to come? We have it in our mind, the day that date is going to come. What's the matter? This is the most significant day in history. How is it that no one here has in mind the date? Well, there's a biblical reason for it. Let's examine it. The book of Matthew, chapter 24. And notice a unique feature about this coming date that explains the interesting situation we find ourselves in. In Matthew chapter 24, notice what it says about this date in verse 36. It says, concerning that day and hour, nobody knows, neither the angels of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father. So there we have it. This coming great, fear-inspiring day of Jehovah, this cataclysmic event, the exact day and hour, is not known by us, not known by humans. Now, that being the case, it raises an interesting irony or question for some. Do you remember what our theme is for this course this morning? Our theme is keep close in mind the fear-inspiring day. That's our theme. That's our goal. But yet we just read in the Bible where God tells us nobody knows the hour and date of the fear-inspiring day. Do you see a question that some may ask? Okay, now if I'm supposed to keep close in mind the fear-inspiring day, but yet no human knows the hour and day, how could that? It may seem difficult to accomplish the goals that our theme has outlined for us. But is it really that hard to understand? Maybe it will help us if we liken this situation something that maybe we are a bit more familiar with. I know what helps me is if I think of this event or this situation sort of like a pregnancy. Familiar with pregnancy. How that works. So then when, let's say a parents they're expecting, or they think they're expecting, young ones to go to the doctor, and the doctor does the test and confirms, yep, about, let's see, this is summertime, about the spring of next year, you're going to have a bouncing baby boy or girl in your arms. So they're just so thrilled and excited. And this is mom's first. She wants to make sure she has everything right. She pulls out her calendar. She says, okay, all right, so about the spring. Okay, now what date? What day was that it's going to come? And the doctor says, well, I can't give you an exact day or hour, but sometime around the spring of next year, you're going to have her in your arms. The mom says, okay, so I'm going to give birth sometime in the spring, but I don't know the exact day when he or she is going to come. How do you expect me to remember that I'm supposed to give birth? Would you expect a mom to say something like that? No. Or have you ever been in the store or something, and you see a mom, and she's you can tell, and you just kind of walk up to her and you say, so when are you due? And she says, due? Yeah, I see you're expecting. And she looks down, she says, girl. Thank you for reminding me. I have a girlfriend. Would you expect that to happen? Even though she doesn't know the exact date or hour, does the expectant mother forget? Does she have trouble keeping close in mind the day? Why not? Because the evidence is overwhelming and obvious. Remember what our theme is? Keep close in mind the fear-inspiring day. How can we manage to do that even though we don't know the exact date? It's because the evidence of that coming day is overwhelming and undeniable. Now, Jehovah has also done something so loving for expectant moms. While it is true that no one can tell them the exact day or hour, isn't it true that a mom, generally, all things going well, has a time period in which she can kind of expect it to be very close and intimate? We know what that is. It's normally at how many months? Normally at 9 months. That's generally the way it goes. Have you ever thought, what a good idea that is? What a loving provision from Jehovah that is. Imagine if he didn't do that. If he didn't arrange things that way, and a healthy baby could just come out at any time. Month 1, month 8. That would be difficult. But he lovingly provides a general time period in which mom can be prepared and be ready. Has Jehovah done the same thing for us with regards to this coming great fear-inspiring day of Jehovah? Yes, he has. Just like a loving Father does. He has done that for us too. You know when that time period is, the general time period in which we could expect the system of things to give birth to this event? Let's read it. The book of Matthew, chapter 24. See if you can pick it out as we read verses 37 through 39. Here Jesus is describing the time of the end, the time leading up to this great event. And in verse 37 through 39, he actually highlights the general time period in which we should expect it to happen. See if you can pick it out. Let's begin reading verse 37. There he says, "For just as the days of Noah were, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. For as they were in those days before the flood, eating and drinking and marrying, women being given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they took no note, until the flood came and swept them all away, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. Were you able to pick it up? To identify general period in which Jesus says this event would happen during the presence of the Son of Man, Christ's presence. When is that? That is now. Those of us who've had the privilege to study the Bible realize that period, we're living in the presence of the Son of Man. The time period in which he has already been enthroned as king and is affecting matters on the earth with regard to righteous ones. And approaching the time when he will soon be used by God to involve in his great coming, fear-inspiring day of Jehovah. Now the question is, how do we know for sure? How do we know for sure that we are actually living during this foretold general time period, during this presence of the Son of Man? It's because of the overwhelming and undeniable evidence. In Matthew chapter 24, the beginning of this chapter, you'll note highlights a question in verse 3 that Christ's disciples asked of him, tell us when will these things be, in verse 3, and they specifically asked him, what will be the sign of your presence? And the conclusion of the system of things. And they were wondering, they were thinking naturally, like, our lifetime is looking for sign. What Jesus goes on to provide is a composite sign, a composite group of overwhelming, undeniable evidence that would let everyone know exactly the time period in which the conclusion, great fear-inspiring day of Jehovah, would occur. That's what he goes on to mention next. We're going to spend just a few minutes looking at some of these just to get a flavor for the overwhelming evidence that we have that points to the time that we're living in. For instance, drop down to verse 7 and 8. And there Jesus says, one thing that we will see, it says, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And then he goes on to describe other things that we would see on the earth. In verse 6, he says, you're going to hear wars and reports of wars. Do you hear wars, reports of wars today? Yeah, it's currently the news item, isn't it? But now some might say, well, hasn't there always been wars in human history? Yes, there has. So they might think, well, why is this different? Well, there were wars going on when Jesus said these words. But yet Jesus said these words. He highlighted that wars would be a sign. So that must tell us that it wasn't just the fact that wars occurred. Jesus was telling that, it's going to be something unique about the wars you're going to be hearing. Is that true today? Specifically in this time period? Yes. While there has always been wars, usually they just involved a certain national group or something, but something happened within this general time period that we're living in. There is a time in which mankind in general, without even giving consideration to biblical evidence, have pinpointed a specific event that was a first. A time when it wasn't just a matter of a couple of nations and kingdoms. It was a time when practically every national group on earth was at each other's throats trying to kill one another. Remember what year that was? That was in 1914. What did they call, what is history, what did they earmark that war as? What do they call it? World War I. Why do they call it World War I? because people in general recognize that never happened before. That is different than the type of wars, reports of wars that mankind had experienced before then. Was that just a one-time fluke, so to speak? What happened a few decades after that? World War II. Just a few decades after that. A repeat of something that hadn't been seen in all of mankind's history before then. What are people afraid of today? World War III. Is it a different situation with regards to wars today? Undeniably. Man, history attests to that fact. Something else. Let's skip down to verse 11 in Matthew 24. An interesting sign that Jesus pointed to. He says in verse 11, and many false prophets will arise and mislead many. That's a sign. He said many false prophets will arise. What does that refer to? Well, false prophets refer to misleading religious elements. Individuals, organizations who are so-called prophets, prophesying about Jehovah's purpose, but are truly false, misleading others, teaching things that are not correct. Do we see that today? Yes. We see many individuals, religious organizations proliferating prophecies, ideas that are anti-truth. The idea that the Almighty God of love actually desires and is planning on burning individuals alive for all eternity. A scriptural teaching? No, that's false. That God actually enjoys, encourages, wants individuals on this side of a borderline to shoot and kill individuals on this side of the borderline. He blesses the bullets that maim, kill, hurt individuals. Is that really true? No, that's false. False prophets today are in abundance. Have we seen that before? Yes. Is it on a different scale today? Indeed. Let me give you an example of the extent, rather the audacity that some false prophets have today. Take your Bibles, please, and turn to the book just before Matthew. The book of Malachi, chapter 2. Now, I'm going to read a verse to you from the Russian Orthodox Bible, translation made by Orthodox believers there. Matthew chapter 2, the verse is familiar to us, is verse 16. Everybody have that there in your copy? Malachi 2:16. Now I'm going to read it to you out of the Russian Orthodox Bible and see if you can pick up if there's any difference in the way the translations read. You ready? Okay. Matthew 2:16, Russian Orthodox Bible, begins by saying, if you hate her, let her go, says God. A little different from what your copy of the Bible reads. Can you believe that? That is what it says right now in the Russian Orthodox copy of the Bible. What is that teaching? That God said, hey, you hate her, let it go. No problem with me. What is that teaching? It's false. It's false prophecy teaching. There's an experience that was related to us. Just to illustrate the frequency that we're hearing of religious leaders not acting in accord with scriptural guidelines. A parent related that this took place in Oklahoma. The little boy went to school one Monday, and the teacher asked him, asked the class, so what did you do this weekend? And the little boy raised his hand. He said, well, we have the visit of the circuit overseer. Now, for those of you who may not know, that's a traveling minister that visits the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses every 6 months or so. Well, the teacher didn't know who that was, so she asked him, now, what's the circuit overseer? And the little boy thought, he said, well, he's kind of like the Pope, but he doesn't molest little kids. First of all, let us say that the little boy was wrong. The Pope has not been accused of such a crime. But you have to ask yourself, where did that little boy even get this idea of a religious figure doing bad things to kids? Where did he get that idea? From the weekly news. It is so common today. Children see that not every prophet is true. Jesus knew what he was saying when he said you're going to see a proliferation of false prophets. In the 2 Timothy chapter 3, Jehovah even provides a sign that goes beyond world conditions, and he gets right down to the very soul attitude of people. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, when you let your eyes glance over the first 5 verses of 2 Timothy chapter 3, isn't it like reading the paper today? You can read through those first 5 verses, you can see the spirit, attitude of people in the world in general today. To the letter, it describes the dominant spirit, inclination, attitude of people today. But now, there is something very interesting in this chapter. Further on, while we're very familiar with verses 1 through 5, drop down to verse 13. There's another very sublime evidence in here. In verse 13, there it speaks of the wicked men. It says, but wicked men and impostors will advance from bad to worse. But notice this, misleading, and notice the last words, and being misled. Now, who is this talking about? The wicked people, the ones that are instigating, promoting all the bad things we see today. This is true. They're going to go from bad to worse. But what does the end of that verse tell us? They're misleading, but what's happening to them? They are being misled. Something is misleading the misleaders on earth today. Who is that? Let's see. Revelation chapter 12 identifies what that means very clearly. Revelation chapter 12, speaking of the events that happens in our time since 1914, Revelation chapter 12, notice what it says in verse 9. So down the great dragon was hurled, the original serpent, the one called Devil and Satan, who is misleading the entire inhabited earth. Who is misleading the misleaders? Satan, the devil. Now that takes on special meaning for us today, because when you think about it, how often have you heard a certain report on the news about some just heinous crime or act or deed? And how many of us have either said out loud or thought in our mind, how can a human being even think of doing something like that? Even dream of doing something so gross? Here's the answer. It's not human. It's not just gross. It's demonic. It's diabolic. It's sinister. Because Satan, the devil, is puppeteering, misleading the wicked ones today. That's why the type of acts and crimes that we hear today are so sickening. It's beyond human imagination. A strong sign that, yes, we're living in a time when the wicked one is misleading the wicked one on the earth. Well, the signs that are provided for us are not just on the negative side of things. Notice another interesting sign is given at just a page over in Revelation chapter 14. Amidst all of the wrong that we would see going on today, notice a provision that is also a sign of the times we're living, found in Revelation chapter 14. Amidst all of this, notice what type of work would be going on, mentioned in verse 6. And there John envisioned during this time, he says, and I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, and he had everlasting good news to declare as glad tidings to the earth, to those who dwell on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people, saying in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of judgment by him has arrived, and so worship the one who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of water. What is this prophesying? That during this time, there would be an angelically directed global work of telling people good news about the times that they're living and directing their attention to the one who's going to make everything okay. Is that happening today? Indeed. While the world in general imagines, dreams, televises, well, what it would be like to be touched by an angel, little do they recognize they're touched every day. Every day of the year. Last year, over 1 billion hours were spent, over 6 million angelically directed messengers of God trying to touch people with good news, the glad tidings of what Jehovah is going to do. It's a sign of the time of living. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, most do not heed the message that is signed to. Remember what we read in Matthew 24, how many will, either because of a deliberate action or because of distraction, which is paying no heed to the message that will be given. It's clear to see that the signs, just a few that we've considered, they point to now. But you know what? These scriptures are not new to you. Most of you here are ministers of God. You shared these with individuals. And I think it's safe to say that at least on one occasion that you shared these scriptures, these overwhelming, undeniable evidences with someone. Someone has said to you, but I'm not so sure that it's really referring to now, that this is really it. Because you know some of these things, all right, sure, I'll give you that one about the one. But see, some of these, I'm not sure if it's at the point where we can really say we're living in this time. What do you think about that? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That would be just like someone walking into the hospital room. Here it is. It's springtime. Mom is there. She's in that room, and she's huffing and breathing. The baby is on his way, and this man walks in there and says, ma'am, I wouldn't be so sure that you're about to give birth. Yeah. Because I have several friends who have a rather large belly, and from time to time they experience some abdominal distress, but they're not pregnant, so ridiculous. It's not just a fact that she has one or two signs. This woman has every possible smell, scratch, itch, pain, itch. It is obvious this woman is about to give birth. We would have to be deliberately ignorant to think and say otherwise. Our time period, the presence of the Son of Man is here, is now. This system of things has every attitude, sign, sound, look, feel. We are about to give birth to the coming, great, fear-inspiring day of Jehovah. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. A person would have to be deliberately ignorant to feel otherwise. Now, seeing that such calamity and adverse events are on the horizon, how should we feel? What should be our focus? Remember our theme? Keep close in mind the fear-inspiring day. As we do that, what should we keep close in mind? The cataclysmic, the disastrous events that are here, a fearful anxiety regarding this day. Well, let's go back to the book of Joel, where we first read Jehovah's description of this event. This time, let's look at Joel chapter 2, verse 21. Notice what he says to those who understand who Jehovah is and what he's going to do in this day. Joel 2:21. Notice our encouragement. Do not be fearful, O ground. Be joyful and rejoice. For Jehovah will actually do a great thing. And what he does. That's how we should feel. That's what we should keep close in mind. Because remember the definition of what the great and fear-inspiring day of Jehovah is? We said it was the time in which Jehovah was going to act against those who do not fear him, but at the same time, he's going to act in behalf of everyone who loves him. He's going to do a great thing for those who love him. We look forward to keeping that event. We look forward to giving to this system, giving birth to a new human, righteous society. People. Well, with this in mind, what should be our goal? 2 Peter chapter 3 reveals it to us. 2 Peter chapter 3, in view of what we discussed, notice what it said in verse 11. There, Peter says, 2 Peter 3:11, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, the things that we talked about, anti-God society. Notice the next thought. Since all these things are thus to be dissolved, what sort of persons ought you to be in holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion, awaiting and keeping close in mind the presence of the day of Jehovah? Peter says, okay, since you know, since all these things are going to be dissolved, think about it. What sort of persons ought you to be in holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion? What was Peter saying? In summary, he was basically saying, act like you know. Since you know where we are in the stream of time, it's clear what sort of persons ought you to be. in the time that we're living in. You know, let's say you go to that expectant couple because you realize it's about the time when baby is due, and you pull up to their house and they have their minivan in the driveway. The back is up, and you just notice they have a big cooler in the back of the van, and the husband's going back and forth from the living room to the van, putting a little barbecue there in the back of the van. You walk into the living room, and there's the tent that they're just all making sure is there. And in your mind, like, what? They're going camping. But you but you ask the wife, okay, so what's going on? You having a yard sale or something? And she's no, we expected baby to come last week, and it just has not come yet. We are just tired of this waiting process. So me and my husband, we're gonna drive up 10 hours into the mountains and just kind of camp out and relax for a little bit. What would you think about your friend? Oh my, she's a monster. Would that be is there anything wrong with camping and going around? No, nothing wrong with that at all. But in view of the time, her situation, that's not the type of things full-term expected moms, families do. It's not wise. It's obvious. In fact, the doctor doesn't even tell a mother, hey, just to let you know, at 9 months it wouldn't be good to go camping. Why doesn't he say that? Obvious what sort of activities. They stay close to home, everything's packed, they're just ready to go. You notice today we haven't talked about, our theme is keeping close in mind and fearing inspiring. We haven't talked about going down a list of do's and don'ts that we shouldn't be involved in, that we shouldn't be doing. Why not? Peter says, since you know that all these things are thus to be dissolved. It's clear what sort of person ought you to be. And these are godly devotions. Holy God. We don't need a list of do's and don'ts. If we really have close in mind and believe and realize the time in which we live, it is oh so clear. What should be our priorities, what type of futures and things we just are not planning, things we're just not going to get involved in, maybe not because they're wrong, but it just isn't the time for that. Many of our brothers and sisters are doing just that, letting the reality of the time dictate their actions. To give you an example, a brother from Kenya gave us this experience. He says he was out in the ministry one day, far distant from where he lived, and word got to him that his hut, his home, had been burglarized. Everything was gone. So he was getting ready to travel back to the village, and he said, everything is gone? He said, yeah, everything. I said, well, if everything is gone, I might as well finish up my long day in service here, and I'll come back in the evening. So that's what he did. And he said that evening, as he was walking back to his village, he noticed a man in the distance. A man caught his eye because he was loaded down with a lot of stuff. And so he started walking, got a little closer to the man, and he noticed a brown coat that the man had on. And he got closer and he realized, that's my coat. And all the items that the man had were his. To make a long story short, there was a way of ringing a bell and getting the attention of the village. The brother got back everything that had been stolen. The brother says, in my mind, that is a literal fulfillment of Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. Seek first the kingdom, and everything else will be added. A district overseer related this experience. This comes to us from India. Him and his wife were walking into the assembly hall, and they noticed a little boy, 4 years old, he said, standing in front of the front doors of the assembly hall, passing out tracts, imagining he was doing street work, but passing out tracts for the brothers and sisters as they were walking in. Well, the district overseer thought that was so adorable. This little man was doing his ministry, and so he picked the little boy up, and he got ready to give him a kiss, and the little boy says, oh no, that would be homosexuality. Brother James, he was shocked that someone so young would know, make a decision on the matter. So they carried the young man into the assembly hall and told the parents what happened. We were just committing the parents and the training from infancy, and the parents were surprised because they said, we haven't had that conversation with our son yet. Where did he learn that? It's been at the meeting. We heard. Well, we could go on relating a few others, but what were all these individuals doing? They were trying to do what Peter said, since they know the time. Live in the core of what is holy, what is right. The time that we live in. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 14 tells us this. Hence, beloved ones, since you are awaiting these things, do your utmost to be found finally by him spotless and unblemished and in peace. There we have it. That's our goal. It's our life's aim right now. Since we know, and what a privilege it is to know. What a wonderful God we have that has outlined what the future holds. Since we know, since we all have hopefully at this point memorized the most significant date in history, remember what it is? Coming, great, fear-inspiring day of joy, a day that we look forward to because he's going to do a great thing for his followers. Now is the time to act like we know. Enter into a relationship with Jehovah if you haven't already. Strengthen the one that you do have. We can enjoy that privilege forever. No, we will enjoy life without end in peace if we do what now? Keep close in mind to fear-inspiring.